Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Stuart Easton, and you are here for narrowing your focus, how sophomores can find their niche and flourish. We've got 10 a.m. start time, but we'll give people a little time to wander in here. So give everyone a minute, but appreciate you being here and looking forward to talking about sophomores. Um, As people trickle in, I'll just kind of give a lay of the land here, and then we'll definitely reiterate this throughout. But there's a few functions on the bottom of a webinar if you haven't been in one before. There is a raise your hand function. You can click on that, and I'd be happy to get to you when I'm done talking. There's also a chat function, which can serve for any comments. And there's specifically a Q&A function, which is the best way to ask me a question. I have that open on the side over here so I can see as questions roll in and address them as they come up. Again, we'll give people a couple of minutes here, but just to reiterate, the most important button there on the bottom is going to be the Q&A button. I am Stuart Easton. I am a college counselor with ESM Prep. My specialty is high school students working towards college. I do work with graduate students and transfer students as well as middle schoolers as well. So kind of run the gamut, but sophomore year is one of those crucial, pivotal years, especially in the arc of a good application to college. So I'm excited to chat with you about that today. We've given people a couple of minutes, so we'll do one more thing before we dive into the presentation. And that is I'm going to start a poll for you. It's just a welcome poll to get a couple of answers to a couple of questions. I've gone ahead and launched that. That should pop up on your screen. 2 questions long, so we'll take a second and answer those. Once we get those answers in, we'll dive into the good part of the presentation. Beautiful. Unsurprising results that we are your parents and your parents of sophomores, which makes a ton of sense. So I'll just let this run for another second and we will dive into the content that you are well positioned to come find out about. So, all right. Couple of new people just rolled in. If you're just rolling in, you'll see a poll on your screen. You are here for a webinar on sophomores, and we're going to dive into that content really quickly. Waiting on a few more answers if we can get them for this poll, just so I make sure I know who I'm talking to. Beautiful. Fantastic. All right. We got almost everyone, so I'll go ahead and end this poll. Awesome to see everybody here. We'll kind of do the official start now. So to reiterate, my name is Stuart Easton. I am a college counselor with ESM Prep, and you are here today to hear about narrowing your focus in sophomore year and how that's a pivotal time for high school students to transition from generally exploring to starting to show some preference, some drive, some focus. And that can be a lot for a high school sophomore. So the way we do that, the way we go about that is incredibly important. One last logistical piece here. I had mentioned it at the very beginning, but if you see on the bottom, there is a Q&A function. That is going to be our most useful tool here. You can raise your hand, you can put things in the chat, but I have the Q&A right up on the side of my screen here. So if a question pops up, I'll address it at the first moment possible. But without further ado, let's dive into this really important, really special topic. It is the most common time that students come to us is during their sophomore year. It ends up being a really useful time to begin working with a counselor because at the end of the day, that is when students are transitioning from starting high school to that well-known pivotal junior year. But junior year is only impactful if we set it up the right way. And for those of you who aren't aware or haven't been through this process before, senior year is certainly important, but for many students, the bulk of their college applications are going out in that first semester of senior year. And although those grades are important and they end up going to colleges, a lot of the actual application work happens before that. And so if we focus on just freshman, sophomore, junior year, sophomore is that transition from freshman where you're just exploring and getting oriented to junior year where you're hopefully specializing and making your final audition, final push for colleges. So that's why we focus on narrowing your focus in sophomore year. And the main key here, or the way we're going to break this down, is we're going to try and address narrowing your focus in multiple ways. So it is the headline, but it shows up in a variety of ways. So if I get my thing oriented here, probably the easiest way or the most universal way in which you're going to narrow your focus is through your academic classes, through the curriculum you choose. Now, this is where, every school's a little different in when they choose, and every school's a little different in what they offer. But the key is that when you're choosing your curriculum, sophomore year represents the time where you want to start gravitating your highest rigor classes to the classes that align with your goals, your major, your career. Throughout this presentation, there's going to be a theme, and it might be a question that pops up a lot for some of us. My sophomore has no idea what they want to do. And that is totally fine. The ideal situation is that freshman year has been an opportunity to explore, whether academic, extracurricularly, and there has been something that clicked. But if there hasn't been one particular thing that's clicked, the hope is that there's at least some things that we know haven't clicked. So for instance, if your student doesn't know what they want to do, but they know that Spanish isn't their passion, then we don't have to pursue as much rigor in Spanish as we would in classes that are still options for us or still pathways for us moving forward. You'll see here that they mention AP courses for the US students, and the goal there is those AP classes represent kind of our biggest opportunity to show colleges that we're serious. All other classes essentially depend on the teacher and the school, but the idea behind the AP classes or IB classes, if you're an IB student, is that they're universal and they're comparable from school to school. And the big reason is the AP tests that pop up at the end. So prioritizing AP classes in the areas of the curriculum that you're most passionate about is a simple, easy way to lock in a clear focus. Now, when we go through this, you might note, well, it's sophomore year. We're already in sophomore year. I don't have the ability to change those classes, or perhaps there's a small change for a second semester, but there's not too much wiggle room. This is something that's going to come up in the next 2 to 4 months for most of us, depending on when your high school chooses classes for junior year. And that's really an essential time to make sure that that top of your rigor aligns with goals, majors, and things like that. If there's any confusion about that, you can ask specific questions, but it does kind of unfold pretty clearly for most majors. If you're looking at a STEM major, an engineering major, math and science obviously take a priority. You could also lump in computer science or any specific engineering courses there. If your student is interested in medicine, obviously, biology, chemistry, physics even can be lumped in there. If you're more on the business side, we want to definitely prioritize math. One really, really important focus for business potential majors, if you want as many business programs open to you as possible for undergrad, you want to try to get to calc in your senior year, which would require you to be through Algebra 2, usually by the end of sophomore year, so that you can set up a pre-calc class and then a calc in senior year. There are some summer accelerators available. A lot of times geometry is a big one to take over the summer because it is a somewhat standalone math class. Algebra 1, Algebra 2, pre-calc, calc all kind of line up, and geometry is a little of an outlier. If your students are already in geometry, there are options for Algebra 2 or some dual enrollment math, but that's one way we can start to align curriculum for majors we're interested in. Or perhaps your student is more into humanities, perhaps a career in law, politics, Perhaps they were an English major like me and they just want to read books. Then you prioritize those English history classes. And you can also start to add in those additional classes that might be options. For some students, that looks like journalism, or there might be a speech and debate class. Whatever classes you can cluster around an interest, even if you don't know the specific major or career, that's how we're choosing our curriculum to show a focus or start to show a focus. Again, if there are any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We do have a note here on UK schools. I don't believe we have any UK families here, but if we do, I'd be happy to touch on that. It's exactly the same options where you're emphasizing the area of the curriculum that align with your long-term goals. This is also the year that we want to start to focus on the people and mentors within our school who align with our goals and are speaking to our passions and our interests. So the, somewhat cold callous thing is we're trying to get great recommendations. And we're trying to get great recommendations from teachers in areas that we're passionate about. So we want to be in medicine. We have a strong connection with our biology teacher. We don't just let it be a strong connection and, run stale. We look for opportunities. We seek them out after class, during lunch. We see if they need any support on additional projects. A lot of times, these are teachers who are passionate about their subject, and their favorite thing in the world is to talk to other people who are passionate about their subject. So by building those school relationships, we're setting up for those recommendations. But almost as importantly, we're testing the waters on whether this is the type of footsteps I want to follow in, whether I truly am passionate about this by talking to an expert in their field. And also, we can seek out additional opportunities beyond the classroom walls, beyond even things that currently exist. And by building these school relationships with our teachers, we're ensuring the letters of recommendation will be available to us down the road, but we're also exploring our passion and seeking out opportunities that might be off the beaten path. As we will get to, some of the best things we can do extracurricularly is to prioritize things that aren't available to everybody, meaning like anybody can join the business club, but not everybody can do a statistical model of the stock market in times of, in COVID or something like that. That's very, very specific example. But the idea being that if you have a passion, your teacher has a passion, and you foster that relationship and pursue it, opportunities will come your way. Equally as important is your school counselor. Now, if you're working with a private college counselor, you do have a lot of support, strategy, goals, but there is nobody who knows the pathway from your high school to specific colleges better than your school counselor. They are going to write a recommendation, and they are, for most people, going to be involved in the process of creating a list and understanding what it is that is going to be a priority and what strategy is going to unfold. So building that relationship so that they know you well and can participate in guiding you while also writing you a great recommendation. This is how we're focusing from like getting to high school and there's a million people to now we're focusing on those really clear, important pieces of our application plan and really clear relationships that we can have. For some of us, we still have relationships with our high school teachers, or we still have that one person from high school who served to open up a pathway for us, served to give us a head start down a road. And that's what we're trying to build here. This is also just a great skill, especially for when we get to college and we really, really can fade into the masses and not and get lost in the shuffle a little bit, or we can form those relationships and get true, impactful opportunities. So it's like a practice run of that, but it's still impactful, still meaningful, and it's narrowing that focus on who are we building relationships with in high school. So academically, relationally, narrowing that focus should be a priority and ultimately should be kind of universal. There isn't really a student that shouldn't be doing those two things, and everybody has an opportunity to do that as long as they kind of make it happen for themselves, go out and pursue it. Where we're going to probably spend the most time today and where there is multiple pathways, multiple ways to make it work is in extracurricular activities. When we're applying to college, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, 30 years ago, colleges were looking for well-rounded students. They wanted a student who could do a little bit of everything. What they discovered, though, they spent their time, they did all their research, and they noticed that well-rounded students were coming to campus doing fine and leaving, but weren't necessarily taking that degree and excelling and taking off. And a college at the end of the day wants you to take their degree and go and make them look really good. And that's how they build up their reputation, they build up their applications, they lower their acceptance rate, they get more competitive. They want students they can pour some gasoline on the fire and know that it's going to go out and come back to them. So what they started doing is they started looking for specialized students. Instead of that circular, well-rounded, they were looking for like an arrow with a tip and a clear thrust. You still need that foundation, but you need to get specialized on top of that. And the reason is if you have shown that you've put time and energy into becoming a passionate business major, then they know when you get to campus, you're really going to take advantage of that opportunity. You're going to take what they're giving you and excel, take that degree, and make it meaningful. So for extracurricular activities, this is a huge chunk of our narrative. We get the essays, but when we're putting our college application out there, we submit 10 activities that represent how we've spent our time outside the classroom. And that's for the common application. For the UC applications, you get up to 20. A lot of people don't reach 20, but the idea being you want 10 solid activities that lay a groundwork for who you are and what you're interested in and how you've spent your time. So you want to find those interests and develop them. The interest doesn't need to be singular, but there needs to be a clear through line of a core interest that's going to align to your major. Ways you can do this, you can pursue academics outside of the classroom, outside of the high school classroom, I should say. You can look for professional programs. Jobs and internships are certainly a big part of this. Volunteering, and then things like athletics, musical interests, additional roles can still be a part of this. And then there's kind of specifics like competitions or contests and there's research, there's different things that might pop up for different people. So what's important is that you don't drop everything and only have business activities on your resume, on your activity list. You should still be well-rounded in the sense of if you play a sport or an instrument, those are totally impactful things to have. They show commitment, they show the ability to stick with something and improve, responsibility, and in a lot of times leadership. But around that, we want to build out an academic interest or narrative around our topic. So an example of a progression that might take place is you might join the business club freshman year. And over the 4 years, you might develop and become the president of business club. While you're doing that, you might spend that summer and you might take intro to business class at your community college after freshman year. After sophomore year, you might do a 2 or 3 week program on a college campus that focuses on sports business. And then for your summer after junior year, you might pursue a job or internship that kind of crescendos that I was introduced to business, I found sports business, and then I went out in the world and did it. And that's kind of how we create that arrow tip. Underneath that, you might take a coding class. And underneath that, you might also volunteer at the Special Olympics, which is sports related and also, community related. And all of a sudden, we have 5 activities there that show growing interest and growing specialization. They give a nice foundation of core principles, but bundled together nicely, we've kind of touched on a lot of these elements: leadership, service, specializing in something, and just real world experience that can create this really nice piece of an application. And underneath that, yeah, we might be in baking club, or we might play soccer, or we might have any number of things. But by creating that core narrative, we've shown a specialization. So for you coming in sophomore year, if your student doesn't know that area, doesn't know the exact area they want to be, the important thing is that they keep moving forward. I've had students who have pivoted in junior year and created what turns out to be really compelling applications because they have a clear story of how they ended up where they are. I'm currently working with a student who was positive she was going to be a journalism major. She knew freshman, sophomore, beginning of junior year, she was newspaper, even wrote for her town newspaper, school newspaper, went through all of the journalism classes, was passionate, did summer programs. And then she realized through this process that she was actually developing into someone who wanted to be more of a doer than a reporter. And she switched to business, and she ended up having a really compelling application because she told the story of how she was positive she wanted to do business because she'd been through this whole other area. The point of that story being that if your student doesn't have a clear focus, if your student is feeling like they're a little bit overwhelmed, maybe even lost, not sure, doing something is the key to getting to a specialization. So you don't have to do exactly today what you're going to do for your major, for your application. You just have to be focused on moving forward. A student who knows they don't like math and science could spend their summer at a speech and debate camp. They could do an international relations class to see if that's something they're interested in. And through those, they might realize, you know what? I'm not interested in international relations, but I really was quite interested in policy. And I found my passion for government through that. And then after junior year, you're interning at a, government agency or something. So the point being that sophomore year is about narrowing your focus, but it doesn't mean you've landed on an answer. And extracurriculars are the way we can start to explore. If you go through sophomore year and especially summer after sophomore year and you haven't tried something a little more specialized, a little more specific, it's going to be very hard for you to reflect and think about what you do want. So again, try something. If you love it, that's fantastic. But if you hate it, that's equally as powerful. That's equally as meaningful because you can start to use that feedback and information to figure out what your final overture in these applications is going to be, your final act junior year. Tried international relations, I hated it. So now what I've decided is I actually do find a passion for business and I've grown that. The final bullet point here is important. There is a huge caveat to all of this, which is if you are seeking to be recruited in sports, or if you are going to be applying for an art or artistic major. In those ways, you are already specialized. Sports is a strange one because depending on your level of recruitment or your level of participation, that is a form of your specialization. You do want to pepper in a specialization and major on top of that. I've never met a sports recruit who has been hurt by having a stronger application around their sports application. So following these same steps is crucial, but obviously to a lesser degree if you are putting in the time, energy, commitment to excel in your sport. So the end result of all this extracurricular activity is essentially saying, can we get you to a place where we are trying to not box you in? We're not asking you to commit to who you're going to be the rest of your life, but we are saying you got to start taking some steps. The most important piece that kind of undercuts all of this, but I tell families, is there's a crazy statistic, 75%, I believe it's around there, of students change their majors in college, me being one of them. And so we're just trying to get you to step one. You're probably going to change your major. Then you might get a job, but you also might find yourself in a different field than you anticipated. And you might wake up one day and be 35 and just be somewhere a million miles away from where we started sophomore year. So the point of that also being that it can feel a lot of pressure, but really all we're asking is just start trying, start making some decisions, start putting yourself out there in a more specialized way than you did freshman year. Freshman year, you cast a wide net, great. Sophomore year, let's cast a very narrow net and see how that treats us. I'm moving quickly here and I'm solo here, so I can have a tendency to ramble. But if you have a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat. If not, that's totally fine. But extracurricular activities is the backbone of specializing. It is the key area where we want to narrow that focus to a couple of elements and really pour ourselves into those to start to build up that arrow that we talked about. Now, another way we're going to start to get focused is in testing. The difference between sophomore year and junior year is that sophomore year we might take a PSAT. Sophomore year we might take our first AP. We are starting to get a focus on where we're putting our time and energy testing wise. So junior year, we want to know exactly what tests we are prepared for or able to be prepared for. Meaning our PSAT results might come back, we might take a practice ACT, and we want to start to narrow our focus on which one of those we're going to pour our resources, energy, time, money into. Same with AP exams. As we start to narrow, we want to be taking AP exams that move the needle for us in our application. There is no magic formula to APs, and the baseline is the more you can do, the better. And so whatever course load or workload you can manage, that's the amount you should do. There's a somewhat popular formula of one AP freshman year, two APs junior year, three APs senior year. Those APs senior year, that second semester grades aren't factored into admissions. They're factored into whether we keep our admissions, but so that kind of back-weighted senior year APs, we get a little bit of a break there. But thinking through that, sophomore year, we're starting to narrow our focus in which APs we're taking, where we're putting our time and energy, and we're starting to narrow our focus on what standardized testing pathway we're going to take. That could be the SAT, the ACT. It could be planning on applying test optional, meaning picking one, but also being aware we don't need the score. Or it could be starting to focus on a no testing policy if we're not able to get a score we feel like reflects our GPA and our abilities. So in other words, this is when we want to start focusing on which test and which strategy are aligning for us. The APs and the PSATs are tools that we're going to use so that junior year we're even more dialed in, even more locked into the tests that are going to move the needle for us and the scores that need to factor into our application. So freshman year, we might not have had much standardized testing experience. Sophomore year, we're closing in, and junior year, we're laser focused on those tests that A, we're prepared for, B, we're able to handle, and C, move the needle for us. As with academics, your testing for this year might be a little bit locked in. The APs you're taking and the APs you're taking. You've maybe already taken the PSAT. But I will say for timing of testing, sophomore year is a big year. If you are through Algebra 2 sophomore year, I really encourage you next summer to go on the test prep. Really take advantage of that summer so that in junior year you can knock out testing as early as possible. If Algebra 2 is a part of junior year for you, that's totally fine. Typically, that's being in the spring of Algebra 2 marks the end of the content that's on the SAT or the ACT. So you've kind of learned everything at that point. You still need that specialized test prep strategies, but you've got the content. So on that note, when you're through Algebra 2, turn on the test prep, get through testing as much as possible. That's why sophomore year is a great time to prepare for this, figure out which test you gravitate towards, figure out what score ranges you might be interested in, and then that way junior year can be all about executing as quickly or as early in the process as possible so you don't end up getting like overwhelmed with junior year finals or even the summer after junior year with applications. You want this wrapped up as quickly as possible. So narrowing that focus in sophomore year can be a great first step. Not as exciting as extracurriculars, but equally as impactful, and especially if we work our time appropriately, can be really meaningful. Any questions through these slides? Fantastic. Okay. Touched on this already, but summer after sophomore year is where you can take everything we've talked about and really make it happen. So for some of these slides, you might be like, well, my classes are locked for sophomore year. My testing plan, I have no wiggle room this year. I'm not through Algebra 2. My APs are locked in. Extracurricularly, my plate is full for the school year. Summer after sophomore year is where you should take a big jump, a big swing to try and see if you could get a little more specialized. So the way this might look, as we talked about, is taking that area that you're somewhat interested in and trying something a little bit bigger, a little bit more ambitious. After sophomore year, the one of the biggest things students tend to do is find programs on college campuses. Not all of these are created equal. There's the pay-to-play ones, there's the hyper-exclusive, impossible to get into ones, and then there's a range in the middle. But one of the reasons it's popular is because it allows you to specialize in something that might specifically be offered by that college. So it's like a real taste of that college major life. And also getting on a college campus around students with the same goals is a way of specializing. It is a way of testing out what it would be like to be around 50 other finance nerds, or, and I use that term as a positive, or to be in a microbiology class with students from the Northeast, the South, Texas, California, Midwest, and just see how specializing, how getting into that small group feels. So that's one way you can treat summer plans. It's also a great chance to get volunteering in your specific area. Excuse me. So for instance, we talked about how you would, and we got a couple of questions rolling in. I love it. We'll get to those in 2 seconds. But volunteering in an area adjacent to what you want to do is fantastic. It could also be an opportunity to start something or participate or create an opportunity for yourself, depending on what your interest is. That could look entrepreneurial, that could look research-based, that could look like serving your community in a way that impacts what you're trying to do. I have a student right now who is a passionate business tech kind of overlapping interest area. And so he started a senior tech help at his local library. And that served as, hey, I'm an expert in my field, and I'm not just using that to go and try and get an internship at Microsoft. I'm using that to help the seniors in my community tap into that same passion. So this is a great place to work with a private college counselor. School counselors are fantastic at what they do, but their job isn't always to specialize and support a personalized program. Summers are a huge needle mover. Summers are a way in which we can take a big leap forward. And it's really that time where your focus can be singular, narrowed. You can have that narrow focus. Test prep, as I said, is a great chance there. Excuse me. So I have 3 questions here, and I'm going to just take them in order. So first question is, child school won't allow them to take a PSAT during sophomore year. Are there options, or should you just take a practice test? So the baseline is just taking a practice test is really, really meaningful because it gives you that first data point. So by giving that first data point, we know what the plan should be. We know that the starting score is X, the areas for improvement are Y, and our end goal is Z, and now we can lay out a plan to get there. Taking a PSAT outside of school is a little tricky. is something I think has been done before, but is not something that I traditionally have experienced. So I would say more likely than not, you just want to take a practice test and probably even a practice SAT and ACT at that point. Winter break is a great time to do that. 3 hours one day, 3 hours another day, and you've got your two practice tests with little impact on grades in school. Um, but that would be my recommendation. ESM, we do have our whole in-house library of practice tests, sample tests. We have a diagnostic test. So if you are working with an ESM counselor, we can get you access to that. Otherwise, there are free resources online that allow you to practice and to take practice tests. That would be my recommendation there. Our next question is it important for your child to take a week summer course at the university they want to attend to show demonstrated interest? I would answer that by saying it's not important in the sense of it doesn't have to be the number one priority, but it does show an interest and it does end up yielding a result. Um, and so the example I would give is I have a student who's applying to Columbia, early decision. We'll be finding out next week. But she did take a class at Columbia. And when she went to write her essays, she wrote a beautiful essay about her experience at Columbia that was concrete, tangible, and about the 2 weeks she spent there with a group of other students who are all quote unquote Columbia students, like that interest level and caliber. So she was able to really personalize that part of her application. Um, so for her demonstrated interest, I would say it might move the needle, a tiny bit. Um, but what it is going to move the needle more significantly on is Columbia knowing that she is an applicant and she's well qualified, but on top of that, that she has thought this through and is committed to that style of university and that university specifically. So I would say if there is a clear number one school, if they offer a clear program of interest, it's a very symbiotic relationship to do that. Now, if there's a program at a different school that's, you know, knocks out of the park, perfect fit, it shouldn't be a priority to go to X school over the perfect program. So in that way, I think there are multiple ways to show demonstrated interest. We don't have to knock it out here, but it is a significant experience to be able to reference and to show an interest. Also throughout there are a couple of really interesting, cool summer programs that do move the needle significantly. One is the U Chicago summer program. The U Chicago summer program allows you to apply ED0. If you're not familiar with application styles, there's early decision, which goes out for most schools by November 1st. It's binding, you get one of them. If you don't get into an ED, you can ED2, which is you get one of them and it's binding, but it's at the regular deadline in January. What U Chicago has done is they've said if you attend our summer program, we know for sure that you're interested in here, so you can apply in September, get an early decision response in that month. If you get in, you're done. You're bound, you're going. And if you don't get in, you still get to ED1 and potentially ED2. So the tiny footnote to your question is, for the most part, it doesn't matter, but there are programs like that that do legitimately open up doors that wouldn't, like very concretely would not be open if you didn't go to that summer program. So overarching answer is, if it fits, if it lines up, it's a huge bonus, but it's not necessary, except in these instances where it opens up a new opportunity for you. Next question. I've been told that our child should get a summer job instead. That shows grit and hard work. Is that a good idea? It is a good idea. It certainly is. It does depend on what your student has done and what your student is doing and the type of application we're putting out there. And so an example of how the nuance could appear here is if your child is the captain of the football team, we're probably getting the grit and hard work element represented on their application already. And that summer job it could definitely be impactful and can continue to develop those. But it might be a situation where we say, you know what, that's been pretty fully developed. Maybe what I need to show this summer is my ability to think outside the box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be entrepreneurial and I'm going to start a window cleaning business. And that is, technically a summer job, but we're kind of checking a different box with it. Or we might say, you know what, I feel really comfortable that I've shown commitment, dedication, grit, hard work. I need to show that my academic side uh, can come through as well. My GPA isn't quite where I think it needs to be. Let me take an online AP human geography class this summer. Or let me go to my local community college and take a couple classes. The way we spend the time in our summer, it really, a great way to think about it is we either want to be building on top of something or filling a gap. And so for the grit and hard work, captain the football team, we want to build on top of it. Great, get a summer job, but don't ignore the academic, the community, or the kind of like self-starter entrepreneurial sides. Again, this is really where that private college counselor can come in helpful because it is personalized and it is case by case, really developing and fleshing it out. There's also something to be said for what type of school you're trying to get into and what major you're trying to get into, where that summer job um, changes. It's also, a summer job bagging groceries, extremely valid, like really can be powerful on an application. Can be a little extra powerful if you're coming from affluence, if you're coming from a situation in which you don't have to have that job. So these are some of the factors that can play a role. End of the day, summer job is going to be on your activity list and it's going to be positive. It's a nice, safe option. But if you were trying to push the edges, push the advantages, there are ways which you can find more more diverse opportunities in the summer. If we're not talking about captain the football team type during the school year resume, I'd also throw out there that a summer job is great, but perhaps then if we're not in that situation, we would have time for a job during the school year as well. And that can check that box without taking up this summertime. And, I'll just label it again. Summer is special because it's contained in a blank canvas. And, you might have sports practices, you might have travel, you might have family obligations, but using that special time to really, really take bigger swings can be a good way of using summer. So I wouldn't say yes, I wouldn't say no. I'd say it's case by case, but I would throw out there that summer is a time we might be able to check some different boxes. Um, the last question I have here is, I'm listening via audio. Are your slides available after the session ends? Yes, these should be sent out to everybody. The slides are designed to be very kind of basic, just topic guidance, but you should get a recording of this webinar as well. And by getting the recording, you can listen to me talk for 45 minutes about this stuff. With that being said, if you do have any questions, you can always email me. My name is Stuart Easton at ESM Prep. So email is seaston at ESM Prep. That should come out to you in the post-webinar email blast as well. And if you're interested in counseling, we have a fantastic team of counselors, but also if you just have a one-off follow-up question, I'd be happy to answer that as well. That is the end of our slides, and that is the end of our questions. Does anybody have anything else that is on their mind that we can answer here? All right, I don't see anything coming in. You still have a couple minutes if you want to throw it in the chat. But again, just to kind of put a button on all of this, the takeaway from what you heard today, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're thinking, oh my goodness, my student hasn't specialized, my student's not focused enough, my student's too general, all that we're saying is take some steps forward in some specialized ways. Don't put pressure on it to figure out what you're going to be doing for the next 40 years of your life. Just say, hey, right now, today, what do you feel like needs to happen? What do you feel like is an area you want to learn more about? If it's coding, great, go do coding. Come back, you hate coding, that's totally fine. We've closed down, we've narrowed our focus. Narrowing your focus doesn't mean take every step perfectly. It means just move forward and start to knock things off or lean into things. If we can do that, that's a successful way to get a sophomore to a good end place, or at least a good application place. And we're not trying to create fully formed people by 18. As I'm sure all of us can acknowledge, we've lived long lives, got lots of opportunities to change and grow, and we just want that marker of college applications to make some sense and have a tangible, clear narrative. I've got two more questions, and then I'm going to end us with a poll here. So if you can stick around for that, that would be great. Fantastic question. How does one figure out a topic for their personal statement? The personal statement is 650 words to summarize who you are as a person. If I asked any of you to do that, it would be overwhelming, difficult, and ultimately probably unsuccessful. We ask these high school students to do that in a really intense moment of their lives. So the way we get that topic for the personal statement is we start in sophomore year. And we don't start by saying, what's your personal statement going to be about? We start by getting that experience. The more experience you have, the more options you're going to have for your personal statement. And the dirty little secret of personal statements is it's not about the perfect topic. It's about the presentation and the way it's written. So the headline for a personal statement is you want to show growth. It's an opportunity for colleges to know that you're going to show up on campus and grow and evolve. You're not going to be the same on the last day as you were on the first day. And if you can throw in a unique or interesting way in which you've grown, or at least like the part of yourself that is core to who you are that has grown, that's the personal statement. Growth in unique and core ways to you. And the way we do that is we get lots of experience. We can do that by just getting out there and trying. Now, some personal statements write themselves. You know, there are personal statements I've read about, you know, losing family members and, you know, having opportunities that are once in a lifetime and all these things that are so core and foundational that you couldn't write about anything else. But for the majority of my students, we're just looking for those moments in their life that kind of define them. The moments in their life that turn them from a sophomore into a college student. And by having the opportunity to do that, or by having opportunities to do that, we are starting the work on the personal statement now. Now, if you're asking nuts and bolts, like Stuart, that was too high-minded, what do I do? Brainstorming, we work with great essay coaches at ESM, getting some support, and then also building a relationship with someone who knows your student so that when you do get to the personal statement time, you have a really reliable, connected person to help guide, someone who knows the student intimately. That is really helpful. I will just throw a little caveat in there that it doesn't always work when a parent is that person. So that's sometimes why outside college counselor works. But I would say bottom line is experience is the name of the game sophomore year. Junior year, continuing that experience, growing, building, and then end of junior year, reflecting on all that and figuring out where you grew the most and what is core to who you are. But fantastic question and super important. Final question here. UChicago info was great. Any other schools offer that option? There's none that are that cut and dry that come to mind. There are some that offer offer some sort of advantage, but it's not quite to the level of a whole new application type. But they are ED0 is relatively new. So I do think other schools will follow a little bit. The name of the game for these schools is how can we get students who want to be here to be here? And ED is so powerful because if you think about it, when I apply to a school non-ED, they accept me, but then they have to wait for me to also accept them. For ED, and specifically ED0, They just have to accept me and then I'm going. And if it's ED0, they can get their hands on me and get me in their school right off the bat. And ultimately, there's a giant pool of applicants who are qualified for these schools, and getting a huge chunk of that pool is the goal. So nothing comes to mind with ED0, but it is also a case by case basis. There are some schools like Wake Forest comes to mind. Um, Notre Dame has some programs or some needle moving programs, but this would be build out a list and then build the strategy into the list. So if your student's passionate about U Chicago, great. If they're not, we don't want to be pursuing ED0 at a school they're not passionate about. So it's a chicken and egg thing, but nothing else comes to mind that strongly, but it is out there that some programs do move the needle. All right. A fantastic webinar. I truly appreciate you listening to me. It was meant to be two of us, but it was just me, and I'm sure a second voice would have been nice. But for now, we're going to end, and I'm going to end by triggering this follow-up poll. It's 3 questions long. It should pop up on your screen. And if you have any additional questions while you're doing that, I will be happy to answer them. So take a second and answer that if you could, and then we'll wrap up. And I appreciate everyone being here. All right, I see some people dropping off, which is totally fine. If you do see that poll in front of you, that will be fantastic to just um, work through. Beautiful, a couple of answers. All right, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Thank you for joining. One more time, I'm Stuart Easton. You can always reach out if you need me. And oh, I think it's just you in here, TB. But nice to see you here, and I'll talk to everybody soon.